Hi, and welcome to the very first episode of the Build Your People podcast with Kathy Humm. I am your co-host, Jenn Sproul, and I'm also the president of the Maryland Center for Construction Education and Innovation, MCCEI. At MCCEI, our mission is to inspire, educate, and connect a diverse population to careers in the built environment. As our podcast title alludes to, with me is our podcast co-host, Kathy Humm. Kathy has over 15 years of experience in human resources, primarily in the construction space. She takes a strategic approach to recruiting, benefits, compensation, onboarding, career development, training, well-being, employee relations, compliance, and retention, and works hand in hand with company leaders to elevate their people, benefits, and culture. We'd now like to take a moment to thank the gracious sponsor of today's podcast, CapEx Advisory Group. CapEx guides impactful capital expenditures in 3 ways: leading individual capital projects, serving mission-oriented funders, and solving unique built environment challenges. For many organizations, a capital project can be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to expand capacity and amplify impact. A capital project can also represent a leap into the world of real estate development, financial stress, and a distraction from core mission activities. By bundling their expertise in finance, design, construction, real estate development, and community development, CapEx's services extend beyond those offered by a typical owner's rep. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Build Your People podcast with Kathy Humm and Jenn Sproul. I am your co-host, Jenn Sproul. I'm the president of the Maryland Center for Construction Education and Innovation. At MCCEI, our mission is to inspire, educate, and connect a diverse population to careers in the built environment. As our podcast title alludes to, with me is our podcast co-host, Kathy Humm. Kathy has over 15 years of experience in human resources, primarily in the construction space. Kathy takes a strategic approach to recruiting, benefits, compensation, onboarding, career development, training, well-being, employee relations, compliance, and retention, and works hand in hand with company leaders to elevate their people, benefits, and culture. Welcome, Kathy.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
Gonna dive right in. In 2022, you went on your own and founded NTP HR LLC. Can you tell our listeners what led you to take this leap?
Well, as you mentioned, I've been in the HR space for over 15 years. The last 9 was at Harkins Builders, and I built their HR department. And what I realized in the last couple of years at Harkins was that I was more of a builder than a maintainer. And I really loved the building a department part of my job. In the 9 years at Harkins, I got very involved with associated builders and contractors. So I built a network there and decided that I wanted to open my own business, focusing strictly on the construction space and to help construction owners elevate their HR departments from transactional to strategic.
That's awesome. So, I know Harkins very well, and I know you from your time at Harkins. I will say that what you built when it came to, recruiting and retention of employees there was incredible, and definitely a lot of outside the box thinking, and a lot of what really large contractors even struggle to do in this space. And as we know, most of the construction industry are small contractors.
Yeah.
So see I can see where you would see the business opportunity to help the industry for sure.
Yeah, well, I definitely drink the Kool-Aid of HR. I drink the Kool-Aid of construction, and I drink the Kool-Aid of ABC. So that's a perfect marriage, the three of them together. And I just want to really help elevate construction.
Awesome. So you already mentioned strategic HR. So what is the difference for those that don't know? What is the difference between a transactional approach to HR and a strategic approach?
So transactional is more about processing payroll, processing benefits. It's the paper administrative side of HR. Strategic is putting a strategy behind your recruiting process, your onboarding process, performance management. What do your benefits look like? And putting a comprehensive package together to be best in class with your benefits. So it's really looking bigger picture than just doing the day-to-day administrative transactions.
So you're saying HR is more than just a 401k package, and
way more. And particularly in today's society. I mean, I read an article not too long ago where the workforce population is drastically shrinking for three main reasons. One is the fertility rate of a household has declined to 1.9 per household. The baby boomers are retiring, and eligible men between the age of 18 and 35 are not in the workforce. They may be living with their parents, they're maybe playing video games, but there's a desperate need for workers. So you have to be creative and strategic to find your workforce. And then you have to be creative and strategic to keep them, to retain them at your organization.
Absolutely. I do think, several of those things are key to the issues we have here in the construction industry. One, the baby boomers. For every 4 people that retire, only 1 person's entering the industry. And then the demographic, when we are a male-dominated industry in which 90+% of our employees are men, and you have, I'm pretty sure it's historic lows of the 18 to 30%
right.
range of men being employed. You have to think outside the box and maybe try to recruit more than just men into those positions. Where all industries are fighting for the same people.
Right. And you have to be creative, and that's where the strategy comes into play. It's less about hiring people who know what you do, construction, carpentry, roofing. It's more about, do they have the skill sets, the soft skills and the essential skills that are important in what you do, and you can train them the technical skills. You can train the technical skill sets.
I would imagine too that maybe as a recruiting person, if you have somebody in charge of recruiting, you need to make sure that they are being open-minded when the candidate comes across. If they don't necessarily fit the bill of the same person that has had that position for the last 20 years, for those same reasons, if you don't have the same type of person applying. So how would you
do? Yeah, you have to think outside of the box. I really suggest looking beyond the 4-year degree, the 2-year degree, and not have that as a criteria, and look more about, are they good communicators? Do they have that get up and go and that fire in their belly to do what you need them to do? Those are the things that you should be looking for. And are they a team player? Do they fit into your culture? Those are so important.
So speaking of team players, when we were preparing for this podcast, you shared with me a video by Jack Welch. And we're going to include the link to the video for in the post for this podcast for anybody that wants to see it. I'm paraphrasing here, but Jack stated that in his opinion, your HR manager is one of the most important positions in your company, more important than your CFO. And he said, for example, if you were trying to get the Yankees to improve their stats, who would you want to talk to? The director of player personnel or the team accountant? And I found that really interesting because, I've been in the construction industry myself for 23 years now, and the person, the CFO, the accounting manager, they're always in. Every company I've ever worked for has been in strategic planning meetings, but the HR manager wasn't always, if there even was an HR manager. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, HR is overhead, and you can't job charge it. So it's the executives have to understand the significance of HR. Look, your most valuable resource are your people who work for you, and who has the best connection with the people and all of the HR functionality. It's the lead of HR. So that person should have a seat at the table and be a valued asset to your C-suite. And I do believe that, certainly you need your accountant, but the HR is the link to the people. And Jack Welch hit it spot on. Matter of fact, a friend of mine who owns a small construction company had said to me, he spoke to a good friend of his who works at Next Day Blinds, and he's the CEO, and he said, your best, most valuable employee for an executive is their HR lead. Awesome. And, having that connection and that sounding board and that resource is critical to the success of your organization. Absolutely. So Jack Welch was spot on.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem to be like your HR manager can make or break your company if they aren't strategic thinking, if they don't truly understand the needs of your company and beyond just your immediate hiring needs, 5 years from now kind of thing. I can see that being a very critical role to fill. Now, as we talked about earlier, the majority of construction companies are small businesses, and very often the HR manager, if there is one, is also doing double duty as maybe the accountant or an office manager or something like that. So what do you say to those small business owners who say they can't afford to have two people in those positions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What happens is an individual will start their own company, and they get to about 20 people or so, and they're wearing all the hats. And they think, gee, how do I business develop? How do I take care of my clients? Now I have 20 plus people, and I have to do their performance management and take care of them and make sure they're happy. So typically what they do is they put somebody from accounting into an HR seat, because you have somebody doing your payroll. Mm-hmm. And then that person kind of moves into the HR seat, which they're two different animals, accounting and HR, completely different. And then, an organization may hit 50 people, and, it's starting to get out of control. There's a lot of spreadsheets. There's no automation. And organizations typically will throw another individual. We need help. And they'll throw another individual, maybe somebody dedicated to HR, in that seat rather than wearing the accounting and the HR hat. And one of the things that I explain to executives is that you really need to just kind of push pause here. And there's a lot of systems, HR systems, that automate these processes for you, so that you're not continually throwing a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 person at the problem. If you automate those spreadsheets and all of that administrative transactional stuff, then it frees up that HR hire to be able to do more of the strategic planning for your organization. So what I would tell companies that feel like HR is an overhead expense and I can't afford it, well, a software system is $20,000, $25,000. If you keep throwing, a salaried or hourly person into your HR department, your return on your investment is very obvious to me. Absolutely.
For an industry that has embraced project management software, accounting softwares and whatnot, it doesn't seem too far of a leap to do the same for HR. But if you don't know what's out there and didn't know that was an idea, I guess you wouldn't do it. So I think that's great. What about potentially hiring off a consultant instead of having a full-time HR person? Like yourself?
And that's an option too. That's what I do. I'll go into businesses that may have an HR representative kind of running the show and partner with the executive team and those HR individuals to come up with a plan on how to build out your recruiting and your retention and those functions that will help retain your people, benefits, compensation, salary bands, making sure they're compliant so that if they get audited, they're in good shape, those kinds of things. But working as a partner with the executive team, mentoring the HR lead so that that person can grow and develop in that role, and then just kind of turn the reins over to that HR person. And also recommend at certain thresholds. Look, you know, usually at 50, you definitely have to have a dedicated HR person, and you should have an HR system, because that will make your life and your HR team's life that much easier. And then by 100, you should have 2 people, and you should make sure that you continue that automation process.
And I would imagine too, when you hit over 50 people, a lot of rules change for employers as well.
Oh, yeah. And I'm running into that a lot with the smaller businesses. You know, ACA reporting is a requirement after 50 employees. And I know from my experience that that can cost you several $1,000s to run that report. It's an ugly, nasty beast, and nobody wants to do it manually. It's a requirement that you have to make sure that you offer medical benefits to your employees and their dependents. And, you know, you have to track employees. If they're working full-time, it's easier to do the reporting. But if you have some that work, under 30 hours and sometimes over, you have to track and trend anybody that makes, earns 30, works 30 hours or more. You're required as an organization to offer them those benefits. So that's a big one, and you talk about return on investment in a computer software system. Systems can do that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you didn't have an HR system, you would be hiring a company to put that report together to go to the federal government. And it's funny, I had one trade partner say to me, well, they're not asking for it. And I said, it just takes one audit. And the risk to the company and the cost can be pretty significant. FMLA reporting after, if you have 50 employees or more, you need to abiding by the FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, which tells you that if somebody's out for more than 3 days, you're required to send FMLA paperwork, which is leave. If you've worked for the company for a year, it's a protected leave for 12 weeks, unpaid leave, but most companies will allow individuals to take sick, vacation, PTO, and then unpaid leave. But those are things that are, federal government, and a lot of small businesses don't realize that. And if you hit 100 employees, you have to do your EEO-1 reporting. Right. And right. I'm running into, these are just basic. There's a lot more to the compliance piece, but I'm running into this a lot where companies, really, we have to do that? Yeah, you have to do that.
Well, and I think that just goes to show, if you hire an experienced HR person, they more than paid for themselves. I mean, the word audit should terrify any business owner out there. I've been at companies that were audited and having, people sitting in the a conference room for a week plus, pouring over every paper. I mean, it is a huge disruption to business, and could be incredibly costly.
And another really quick thing I want to say is that FLSA, classifying employees as exempt and non-exempt. Yes. That's, that exempt is salary, non-exempt is hourly. And you need to be really careful with that, because if they should be non-exempt and you have them as exempt and they're working more than 40 hours, that could be a claim down the line for you, and you would be required to pay that back pay of overtime pay along with penalties. So, that's another big one that you have to be mindful of.
Oh, so I mean, it seems to me it's a no-brainer to one just to even utilize, especially if you're at that threshold, you're about to hit 50, to hire someone like you to help you navigate that, and then you're almost paying for a senior leader without putting them on payroll, basically, and helping and making sure that you've got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed so that everything goes smoothly. The worst thing that could happen is to lose money needlessly to the government.
Yeah,
Really.
for sure.
So what, this is probably a very loaded question, but what is one thing that you think the construction industry needs to change, how they approach HR in general? What's like the big thing that we should be focused on?
Well, for HR to work, you have to have executive buy-in. So any executive who is listening out there, you need HR as your right-hand person to succeed in your business. There's a lot to unpack with HR, as Jenn mentioned in my bio. It starts with your strategic plan. And what does that look like? What's your plan for the next 1, 3, 5 years? And then how do you tie in your HR goals and objectives to your strategic plan? And then from there, you start building out your recruiting, onboarding, benefits, performance management, compensation, all of that. And it all ties to your strategic plan. So it's so critical that executives have buy-in to HR and that they factor in the cost of having an HR representative and ultimately an HR team for their organization. I think that's the biggest thing. And then it's a matter of walking through the steps to get them into more of a strategic mindset.
Yeah, so I come from like a business development background, and anybody that's familiar with business development probably is familiar with the bamboo analogy of where bamboo requires, like any plant, water, sunlight, and good soil to thrive. But even if the first 4 years of giving bamboo those three things, you see nothing at the surface. But then at the 5th year, it sprouts up like 80 feet in a 6-week period of time. So the analogy is, for the first 4 years or so, bamboo is growing this strong root system that is large enough to support the weight and the height of that 80-foot shoot in year 5, meaning that business development is a long game, right? You have to cultivate your connections and your clients before you finally get that job. I feel like it's the same for recruiting. You can't just be hiring for tomorrow's job that starts tomorrow. You need to think, well, where do I want to be as an employer in 5 years? What size projects do I want to be doing? Are there markets I want to be getting into that I'm not in now? And then what kind of hires do I need to do? So what do you say to an employer who is thinking that way? What are some steps they can take to plan for their long-term hiring needs?
So the analogy applies to HR as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you get serious about HR as an organization, you hire an HR representative to take you to the next level. You hire someone like me to work with your HR representative within your organization or the executive team. The first year is going to be about organization and processes. So, aligning job descriptions, career paths, and understanding, what does it take to get to the next level? Do you have the right policies in place? Parental leave's a big one. Marijuana and drug testing are big ones. Those kinds of things. So processes, procedures, getting organized. And in that first year, start to develop your strategy around, for example, recruiting, and what are the type of people that you're going to need, and where are you going right now? What sources are you using? And how can we expand that so that we can out of the box, think outside of the box on types of people that would fit into the culture and have those essential skills that would work in our organization. And then, build out that strategy so that you can see the return on your investment from, say, year 1 to 2 to 3. So really, year 3, you're going to see, okay, we've built this out. We've gone to these career fairs. We've advertised and we promote this on social media. Whatever your strategy is, you'll start to see some return year 2, but really you'll start to get those people in the door, and then you put them in your career development path and your training and all of that. So it is, it takes time. But you have to start somewhere. And what I'm finding is when I go into organizations that have 50 to 100 people, they've been just doing it the same way since they started, which is kind of wing it and be reactive rather than proactive. And we need a project manager. We need a superintendent. We put it on LinkedIn, put it on, Indeed. And, my job is to get them to be thinking more strategic and have that roadmap of how are you going to get to where you need to be, in year 2, 3, and 5.
One thing that we talk a lot about here at MCCI is investment in your future workforce. And a lot of employers say they want to hire that project manager with 3 to 5 years experience. And you're paying for somebody who's been trained by somebody else with that. So you're paying a premium. They've also been trained not how you do things as well. So sometimes it is, I think obviously there's times when you do need somebody that already has experience that nobody else in your company has, right? There are those strategic hires. But when it comes to the roles that you're routinely having to fill, why not do what things that I've seen Harkins has done, which is, hire young people with no experience, give them the training opportunity to, as an intern or as an apprentice, train them yourself. Yeah, it costs a little bit of money to train someone, but you're building loyalty, and you're also providing a mentorship opportunity to those people in your company that are already there to help grow the younger people. I think there's obviously that gap of the experienced person that still needs to be filled. But what are some strategies that you've seen that are successful in growing those young people into project managers that somebody here?
Well, let's face it, the superintendent boots on the ground people it's almost a dying breed.
Yep.
So if you keep doing the same thing, that's the definition of insanity. Find somebody who has construction experience and who can build a stick frame building. We can't look for people like that because they're non-existent. So we have to start, we have to go a different path, and we have to start with the younger, newer generation and paint the picture of what it will look like in 1, 3, 5 years. That's why career paths are so critical to the younger generation. When I was at Harkins, we started a winter internship program, and we advertised it on social media, and the focus was on non-traditional construction people. So someone who was changing careers, individuals that were in high school VOTEC programs, that one of the gentlemen that we hired as an intern was military police. I mean, so we had all different different types of candidates, and not your typical 4-year degree Virginia Tech, or, I've worked 10 years in my dad's business, construction, and, I'd like to come work for you. We can find those people pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm.
But we ended up having an internship of about 10 non-traditional candidates, and they worked out really, really well. It was phenomenal.
I personally have a non-traditional pathway into project management. I started off as a marketing assistant at Whiting Turner, went through their project engineers training to become a better marketing person. And then when I was in that, I was like, I think I could do this.
Yeah.
And they get paid a lot more money than the marketing people do. So I actually haven't had the opportunity at Plano Calvin to do that. And it was great. I was in that position for years before I went back into marketing. But I'm grateful every day that they gave me that opportunity to grow myself. And I think that, and actually I have a very good friend who also comes from a marketing background for an architecture firm, who's now considering becoming an electrician. I think it's, as women specifically, like, a lot of us did not ever get exposed to the idea of working in the built environment. So some of us went a different way at first, had pathways at first, and it wasn't until we were adults that we realized maybe I could actually, one, be really good at this, but also support my family on a career, because careers in construction are much better paying than traditional, like, female held roles. So anybody listening, absolutely do what Harkins did, do what Kathy's suggesting. I love the winter internship program that you put together there. I share it with people all the time. It really is out of the box thinking. Like you said, those superintendent positions are typically filled by somebody who started off in the trades, and the trades are not being filled either. They have the same problem. So if you don't have any going to become a carpenter, how are you going to have somebody with 10 years carpenter experience to be your superintendent? Just so they're not there.
Yeah, and one of the biggest kept secrets is construction for women is just a phenomenal career. We've come a long way in construction as far as accepting and embracing women in the field and in the industry. We still have more work to do, for sure. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of opportunity for women. And I commend you, Jenn, for raising your hand and saying, I can do this, because a lot of times women need to know what their next step is 100% before they take that step. And so that's great that you took the step and said, you know what, I want to do this. I want to go in the field and I want to work there as opposed to in marketing. That's great.
It was fun. It absolutely was fun. And I love, I had very young children when I was in that, and actually prior to having kids. So it's really been cool for my daughters to see that, to grow up. Like, they don't think anything of the fact of a woman in construction. Like, it's what they've always known. So I'm hoping we can slowly change the narrative on what a construction worker is.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Awesome. So I think, before we wrap up for the day, are there any other thoughts that you wanted to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think another thing I'd like to share and kind of leave our viewers with is HR representatives need to be mindful of what's most important to the C-suite, and that's risk and cost. And having the confidence to put together a business case, a conversation around a certain topic in HR, and presenting that to the executives team. We as HR representatives know that and present in a way that's going to capture the CEO and the president's attention, and in turn move the needle in HR.
That's great. That's so important. And I think a great way to wrap up our first episode.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so grateful that you agreed to do this series with us. And I want to thank everyone who is listening to the Build Your People podcast with your hosts, Kathy Humm and Jenn Sproul. We hope you enjoyed our first episode as we begin tackling the construction industry's biggest HR issues. If you're keen to see how these ideas can be applied in the real world, join us next episode when we'll be taking a deep dive into recruitment best practices. If any of our listeners have a topic or question they'd like us to cover, please share them in the comments. And please check out all the links and resources in the show notes and follow us on social media. That's all for this episode, folks. See you next time.